Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we turn to talking about the Supreme Court nomination process, which is currently ongoing in the United States Senate. Basically, what happened was another Supreme Court justice passed away a few weeks ago, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and now President Trump has nominated a replacement named Amy Coney Barrett, and she is a fine replacement choice. She's got a great track record, a good education and judicial experience, and right now, currently, she's being reviewed and going through the process to be confirmed, which involves her taking questions and talking with the Senate, who will decide whether she'll be confirmed at the end of this hearing process. That's been going on all this week for a few days now, and today we're going to talk about an interesting development from one of the second day's proceedings. What happened was, at one point, something came up, and the Democrats are claiming that Amy said the wrong word when she was talking about alphabet people. Alphabets came up in some kind of situation, and apparently her saying sexual preference is supposed to be offensive because it's supposed to be called sexual orientation. Now, this is some kind of new meme they're creating. It's actually something I hadn't really thought much about. I don't think most people know much of the difference. I don't think if someone says one or the other, they necessarily mean anything different. But regardless, this is what the Democrats are going for. They're desperate. Amy Coney Barrett is like a great nominee. She has no real big flaws or issues or things to complain about. She's been killing it in the interviews, like acting like a rock star, answering everything perfectly, giving them all the right answers and the perfect resume and all this stuff. So that's why they've gotten to this desperate point where they're saying her saying preference instead of orientation is offensive. Now, to be fair, to try to like steel man their argument, I guess what they're going for is if you say preference, it makes it sound more like choice, like you prefer something, whereas orientation is like where you're born with it. But to me, I really think they're interchangeable. I don't see the difference. I feel like if you do have a certain orientation, that would affect your preferences as well. It's just kind of like the chicken or the egg argument. They're not really that different. And in fact, as you'll see in today's story, this is going to get really intense because a lot of these people had used both phrases before. No one really had an issue with this until it came up in this hearing. It was almost like the Democrats created this problem out of thin air because in addition to them trying to pretend it's not the right word and pretend that preference is offensive, they also had some other people on their side, including even the dictionary. The dictionary actually changed its definition following this day. That's right. The Democrats in the morning can decide something is offensive. They spread around on Twitter, and by the end of the day, the whole kind of establishment, including the dictionary writers themselves, Merriam-Webster, changed the word, and now all of a sudden that's offensive. Even though no one thought it was before, even though other Democrats and conservatives, everyone had used these terms pretty interchangeably, and only the most specific, most nitpicky people would find this an issue. But that's where we are today. That's why we're going to this article. We're going to start with a tweet from Crowder. It says, "I didn't believe this was real, but it was. Webster Dictionary redefining words on the spot, apparently in an attempt to smear a SCOTUS nominee. Archive is here. No mention of the term being offensive just days ago." So this is a retweet. This is the change to the definition. And yeah, it says offensive at the end now. So you can see here's preference, and you can see the word here, and it doesn't have that offensive line that they just added. There's archive links here. I'm going to share a link to the dictionary and to the tweet so you guys can follow up on your own. But essentially, yeah, the dictionary changed the word. They're in the bag with the leftists, just like every other major like organization, company, establishment. Like everyone is in the bag for the left. They're trying their darnest to kind of like help the Democrats. It's election season, so they want to kind of go after this nominee coming from Trump, who's up for re-election. But in actuality, what's really happening is Trump picked a great nominee. Amy Coney Barrett is an honorable justice. She's a family woman. She's an American patriot. So it's going to actually make the Democrats look worse the more they go after her. Just like what happened with Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh was the previous justice nominated a couple years ago. And the more the Democrats went after him and got very vicious and after his family too, which is the same thing they're doing with Coney Barrett. And it's just going to backfire on them. I think this whole hearing, if you watch any of it, if any normies actually watch this stuff, I don't think they will. I think this is some real deep politics stuff, but it's worth mentioning. It's worth going over. It's worth getting the details out there and just explaining it to everyone who might have heard a few things, something like saying preference. Now they're going to say Barrett is offensive or racist or bigoted or something. They try to infer that, but it's just not true. It's just not based on reality. Like we said, they had said this term before. It's all of a sudden they find a way to kind of attack someone, and then they're like, all right, well, we're changing the words now. And that's just a common liberal tactic too. Before we move forward, I have some more examples and other stuff about this, but the basic premise is, yeah, this is just them playing word games. That's the common liberal tactic. They try to play word games. They change the meaning of words. They use words the wrong way on purpose. It's kind of like, in another way, it's kind of like how they overuse terms like racism or sexist, or they use a term like feminist, and they just start to mean totally different things. Like at some point, racism just lost all meaning to them, and they'll just call anyone racist that, for example, just does something a black person doesn't like, or if you arrest a black person, even if they commit a crime, that's supposed to be racist now. It's just this kind of very biased thinking, this perversion of language. It's happened with other terms before too. We've seen them do it with, for example, feminism. Feminist used to be a thing about empowering women, giving them equality, and now it doesn't mean that much anymore. Now they pretend that's what it means, but it actually means, oh, you're trying to give them special treatment. You're trying to give them better treatment and more advantages, and also just bashing on men. And it happens with other things. This is just word games. It's just the classic leftist MO. And I think it's worth mentioning because at this point, you just can't take their words seriously. They don't even use the dictionary right. It's funny that the dictionary would actually change to help them now. So it just basically means they control the language. They can change words and make them mean whatever they want. And it's a pretty dangerous place. It's a pretty 1984 like place. This is what they warn us about in old sci-fi novels and movies about a far left government being hyper in control of everything, authoritarian, fascist. This reminds me of a V for Vendetta or something like that too. So with that said, let's go to the next example. This is what I found really funny. This is the highlight. This is the top post on Explore for Twitter for over a day now. And it's just totally ridiculous. This is showing how big tech is getting involved. Big tech is trying to push this meme too and act like Amy Coney Barrett is offensive to Alphabet or something like that. And it's just not true. She just said sexual preference, and this Senator Hirono calls it out as offensive, and they're at the hearing, as you can see in the pictures, and it's just totally ridiculous. It's like, okay, you call it as offensive, but this has got to be the least offensive thing ever. I mean, come on. It's not offensive. She didn't say she hated anyone. She's not attacking anything. She's not saying she's against any certain person for a certain reason that they can't help. This is not the biggest deal ever. She's not being that offensive. She just happened to use a term that they say is out of vogue now. This is a term they used just a few days ago, a few weeks ago. As you'll see later, we have other Democrats saying this term very recently. It's just a total made up fake news. It's just totally ridiculous. This senator acts like she's some kind of hero for calling this out, which I think is insane. And we're going to read this summary in a second. But one thing I want to point out, I said this on Twitter actually, and they always put this person behind Amy Coney Barrett. And I noticed this. It's been going on for 3 days now, many hours, and every single camera angle, every single news organization has this guy behind him. It actually was a different guy today, so I don't know how they changed the guy out or something. It might be security or something. I don't know why, but they put this guy behind Barrett, and it's just so distracting. It's so like they're trying to subliminally throw you off and make you not be able to focus on her. Sometimes the people behind them are like tired and making little faces and blinking a lot. It's very distracting, and I think it's definitely a sign that they're very, very likely manipulating the visual image of this and trying to handicap her visually and make her look bad in the public. So this little blurb says, Judge Amy Coney Barrett apologized for her use of the term sexual preference at her Supreme Court confirmation hearing after Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono detailed how the term is unacceptable. Let me make it clear, sexual preference is an offensive and outdated term, Senator Hirono said. It is used by anti-LGBTQ activists to suggest that sexual orientation is a choice. Hirono also asked Judge Barrett if she had ever sexually assaulted anyone, a question which she said she asked all judicial nominees. So this is really absurd, crazy people. These are people that are not to be taken seriously. The Democrats have really lost their crap on this hearing. As you can see a little bit in this image again, she's got this board behind them. All the Democrats have these display boards, and they try to put up pictures and they try to do different things. Like they really look like conspiracy theorists. That's something that another senator, Ted Cruz, called them out for, saying, oh, I'm sorry I don't have these fancy boards with string tied on them trying to solve a conspiracy theory or something. And that's really what the Democrats look like. They're trying their darndest to come up with these fake news hoaxes, and they're using these visual displays that just make them look really cheesy and phony. And sometimes it's borderline exploitative. Like, for example, a couple of the senators, I remember this happening a number of times. They'll bring up pictures of these families, and then they'll talk about how one of the people in the family got deathly sick, which is super sad. I admit, like, that's interesting, and it's not something I'm trying to brush off and say say is terrible to talk about, but they're obviously bringing it up in this situation to try to act like Barrett is against cancer patients or something. It's totally absurd. I think it's related to her possibly, they think she's going to take away healthcare or something. I don't know. It's just totally idiotic. That's why you can't even explain it. You can't really get into the minds of these lunatics, and they can't even display themselves properly. That's the thing. They think they're making sane arguments. They think they're making good points, but they just look like crazy people with boards, and they're putting up pictures of dead people, and it's just super sad and messed up. Next, we have some responses to my original tweet about this. I originally tweeted saying that saying preference instead of orientation is the best dig Dems could come up with. So that was my response to this moment. Again, this moment has been on the top of Twitter for a couple days now. Like, it's a very, very biased, silly moment, and it shows that this site, Twitter, is biased for them too. And then some people responded. Here's a quote from RBG saying sexual preference in 2017. I actually wasn't able to confirm this, so if you know of a confirmation, I'm not actually sure if there's backup for this, but there is another interesting one. This one we can confirm, because here is a video of Joe Biden saying the term that is supposedly very offensive. Let's go ahead and check out this quick clip.
Regardless of color, sexual preference, or background, regardless of color, sexual preference, or background.
So that's Joe Biden in some sort of campaign meeting, some kind of PBS Zoom call with a bunch of black people, obviously. And he said, regardless of skin color or sexual preference. So he says the term that's supposed to be super offensive. He's the nominee for the Democrats. Why aren't we hearing about this? Why weren't they calling it out here? Surely if this was super offensive, all these people in the room would be shocked, right? Wouldn't they say something? Wouldn't they gasp? I mean, if this is so offensive, they act like it's the worst thing ever. Surely some of the people in this room would have freaked out, but they appear calm. They appear to not really think that's a big deal. It's just a word. It's just a term. It's not intended to be an attack on anything. It's just the way someone phrases something. Maybe it is outdated. Maybe it's not. I'm not trying to deny that, but surely people could say it and not be intending offense, because Biden just did it. But if Amy Coney does it because she's a Trump ally, I guess, I don't even know if you'd call her that. She was nominated by Trump, but she's actually being elected in an impartial judge position where politics aren't supposed to take place. That about wraps things up. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Hit the like button if you liked what you saw. Subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you on the next video.